discussions. Looks like since we got 5 people, I think we'll just do one group. That works out fine. There's under the, there's a page called the info page. You get to it by hitting the info tab on the course, and you'll find some documents there that are pretty relative to just different parts of the course. So I think there's a document there under the files area. It says discussion group criteria or something like that. What that does, we have these rubrics, which are kind of, grading standards that we use in various courses. It's really helpful, I find, to be able to see the grading standards that our professors are using for grading. So when you go into your course, if you go into the info tab, look under that files area, you'll see something that has to do with discussions. There's one for discussions, there's one there for book reviews, and there's one there for the project chapter. I really encourage you to take a look at those as you're in the course. And, the discussion, as you'll be doing some discussion with each other for the next few weeks, you'll kind of want to see what the grading criteria is, and take a look at that. I really encourage you to do that. You're going to be doing a weekly journal for the first 7 weeks. For most courses at BGU, you do a journal, as you've probably seen if you've been in a course. And look on the online course. It kind of gives you the three organizational categories for that. It's like kind of a summary analysis of what's going on in application. And it's kind of the same approach for every journal. You'll be doing probably some assignments in some of the weeks that will relate some of the reading to what I like to do. And I'm going to have Dr. Graves kind of handle this course, probably take the lead, because he's going to take over this course for me. But I like to do a few weekly assignments that relate to the final assessment. Like if there's a piece there, like you'll be, in a few weeks, you'll be doing some reading in a book by Imordino on assessing at the public sector. You'll be doing another one there, I think, The Complete Leader. And sometimes, out of those kinds of books, you'll get some categories that will be helpful for use in your final project. So, I might just do a, assignment to say, pick some categories from Imordino's book, from the Complete Leader book that you think might be helpful for you in your assessment process. And then just give me a few paragraphs about that issue. So you'll probably see some weekly written assignments like that. Most of your weeks, though, will be doing some reading and then working in your discussion groups. It's really good to be bouncing ideas off of each other. We've all got different levels, different areas of expertise. I really find it helpful as we glean ideas and thoughts from each other, because you're all experts. We are just called professors, but basically we're all professors when you're at this doctoral level. We're colleagues. We've got to share and say what's been helpful in our context, in our organizations, and be willing to share that with each other as we are trying to be faithful stewards of God's abilities and what God's put us in the context of wherever He's located us. You're going to do a final presentation at the end of this course. Basically, that's just about a 5 to 7 minute presentation. What that will be is just an outline of your assessment process. And we'll talk more about that as we get toward the end of the course. The final paper of this course, you do a final paper for every BGU course. You'll do the book reports. What we've gone to a system now at BGU is that we do one book review for each credit of a course. So for example, if you're taking this course for 8 credits, you do 8 book reviews. If you're taking this course, say at a master's level at 6 credits, you do 6 book reviews, okay? And there's required books, and I think for the doctoral, you'd review all those books, I think. I'd have to count those up again. If you need some more pages, I'm sorry, you'll read all the books on the required list, okay? If you need to read some additional pages to make the 3,600 pages for your 8 credit course, you would read also from the recommended list. But for the written book reviews, you need to do 8 of those, okay? And I think that would probably pretty well cover, if I remember correctly, the required books. And of course, if you do it the master's level, you only have to do 6 of them. You know, pick 6 that you'd really like to do a book review on, and that'll be fine. That'll be the book assignment. I already mentioned the journal. The chapter 3 of your paper will be what we call an organizational assessment plan. And hopefully, as you go through the different weeks of this course, you're going to develop some thinking about organizations. You know, what makes organizations work well, what makes them not work well. You'll be looking at some areas of assessment that are typical in assessment. You know, I know that comes out especially in the book by Imordino, and I'm not as familiar with the complete leader. You can give us some insight on that one, Jeremy. But the assessment plan will basically be your plan that you could actually use in an organization to assess that organization. You know, assessing the leadership infrastructure, assessing the employee, if there's staff, you know, what's the staff emotional climate? You know, how does that organization do strategic planning? How does the financial structures of that organization work? You know, how do the donor structures work? How does that organization relate to its environment? You know, as you look at Drucker's book, you know, does it seem to be interacting with its environment, or does it kind of become closed off and clustered? Does it function in kind of a silo mentality where different departments kind of do their own thing and don't talk to each other? Okay, you'll be kind of thinking through some of those typical characteristics that we think of when we're looking in an organization and trying to understand the health of that organization. And hopefully, you know, some of the books that we've got there on that reading list are going to help you become a little more familiar with some of those categories. Well, at that point, Jeremy, Dr. Graves, why don't you kind of tell us, the group, kind of what you've been doing? You know, you've been doing organizational work for a while. Maybe you could just mention a little bit of that, what you've been doing.
Sure. So I work in kind of 2 different arenas. I work here in Boise, Idaho, at Boise State University as an instructional designer. And I do a lot of work of creating programs for organizations within our community, specifically targeted towards their pain points or their needs. So every program that I create starts with an organizational assessment. We go in and we assess the organization and find out if what they think they need is actually what they need. And in the process of that, then we develop either a class or a strategic plan for them that they can begin to work with. So I've worked with Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 500 companies. I've worked with manufacturing companies, both here within the Boise, Idaho area, and then also throughout the United States, and also internationally. Done some work in India and some other places around organizational assessment. The second hat that I wear is I work with Complete Leader, which is one of the books that you're going to read, and you're going to hear from actually the guy who started the program. And this is all he does is organizational assessment with organizations using this program that he has put together called the Complete Leader, which is kind of a 14-month program where he takes organizations through all aspects of really kind of looking at their organization from a holistic approach. He's a believer, but he spent a lot of time in the business community developing that program. So I'm excited when Bill kind of first approached me about, I'm a Bakke graduate, by the way. So 2012 was when I graduated. And when Bill approached me about potentially, you know, stepping into this class, I feel like it's a real good fit for who I am and what I do, because it's kind of the merger of the world that I live in currently. I'm just excited to be able to be a part of it.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, that's basically really why I was excited too to have Dr. Graves jump in here with us, since he knows the BGU environment. You know, he knows what we're trying to accomplish. At the same time, the Lord's kind of given him some opportunity to be working with some organizations, and so he's doing what we're trying to teach in this course. So I just so appreciate having him on board.
Awesome.
All right. Let's see, anything else we need to see on these slides that will be helpful? Yeah, these are some of the books that kind of the stuff that we'll be doing. We're going to talk about Drucker's book a little bit today, The 5 Most Important Questions, and then this Walmart article in China. Next week, you're going to be reading a book by Bullman deals with the frames model, we call it, kind of looking at an organization from a structural point of view, the leadership structures, from a human resources point of view, how do they work with how does that organization work with its people? Political, that term should be in quote marks, because it's what that political means is just what are kind of the power structures, the power points that go on. In every organization has that. Some are written, some are unwritten. And then there's the symbolic cultural rituals area that Bullman and Deal talk about. And again, sometimes those are unwritten, but every organization kind of has a culture. It has symbols that are maybe important to it. Maybe have mottos. We could put some logos up on the screen. If you saw a big apple with a bite out of it, what would that might bring to your mind? Probably Apple computers. Okay, no. Here in the United States, if we saw two big M's, or a big M in red, we call them golden arches. What would that bring to anybody's mind?
McDonald's.
Okay, McDonald's. Okay, all right. There's those organizations. They've got a logo. That's part of their symbols, their culture. Okay, and companies will sometimes, they may sometimes even when we put out a mission statement, it might include some of that cultural symbolism. A book called Riding the Waves of Culture by Trumpenauers, again, kind of just go over some of the cultural considerations. Depending on our culture, we're going to approach issues like problem solving, leadership, even organizational structure are going to sometimes be a little different because of the culture in which we live in. There's a website that I'm going to refer you to in that week by Hofstede. He and his organization kind of went through a lot of characteristics, passive, aggressive in terms of leadership style. I think he's got 7 domains, he calls them, that he does some investigation on. And they're kind of helpful as we're looking at various, especially in cross-cultural work, or what kinds of issues that we need to be aware of. Joy at work, which of course is the model that we really try to practice here at BGU. Dennis Bakke wrote the book, The Joy at Work. He worked with that concept to start with. He's got another book that I have you reading for this course, The Decision Maker, which is kind of done in a novel form, but it looks at an organization and how the joy at work model kind of functions. Jeremy brought in a couple other books, Improving Organizational Processes. There's a book by Goldratt and Cox that you'll be looking at, just kind of looking at how an organization works. I think you used the term benchmarking, right?
That's a little bit farther down.
I'm sorry, that's 7. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. No, improving organizational processes is the idea of finding the constraint, finding the thing that's not working within your organization, and beginning to kind of do some problem solving around why it is or isn't working. So it's a book called The Goal by Goldratt. It's actually kind of a classic when it comes to process improvement in organizations, and so we're gonna take a look at that. And then I've got someone coming in to do a Zoom room who actually works as a colleague of mine at Boise State, but who has used this material in several different organizations and helped them in that process.
All right. Yeah, that's right. We replaced Sigma 6 with that group. Yeah, that book. Good.
Yep.
Another concept is adaptive leadership. I was using a book before on that, just, leadership that's needing to adapt to the particular context, whatever's going on at a particular time in an organization. Dr. Graves brought in a book called Canoeing the Mountain. Just give us a little synopsis of that book.
Yeah, so this book is by Todd Bolsinger, who's from Fuller, and his concept of canoeing the mountains is really based off of what got you to where you are now doesn't necessarily prepare you for where you're going. And so adaptive leaders are those who are able to look at the landscape in front of them and say, what do I need to change? What can I take with me that's brought me this far, but what do I need to change moving forward? And so that week, actually, we're going to have a Zoom room with a pastor friend of mine who has actually taken this model and began to look differently at how he is doing church. And so I want to bring in some of the adaptive leadership in that realm as well.
All right, that'll be great. That was a mistake on the slide. You don't have that other book any longer. So we're using Canoeing the Mountain as the book for that particular week. The other one is job benchmarking. Now, I'm familiar with the Immordino book, which is kind of built on the Baldrige model, which kind of goes over some of the classical areas of assessment, like we said, leadership, infrastructure, emotional climate, strategic planning. Talk a little bit about job benchmarking, Jeremy.
So what the Complete Leader does is it looks at 25 different leadership competencies and then helps you understand different assessments that are available for you to benchmark the job. And when we say job benchmarking, what we're saying is if the job could talk, what kind of person or what skill set would be necessary for the person to be successful in the job. And so there's many different ways that we can, kind of get the job to talk based on doing an assessment of folks who have had the job, people who are currently in the job, and having them kind of ask questions of it. And so it's something that Ron Price has been doing for many years. And it's something I've found just extremely helpful when we're stepping into working with organizations, is to find the right person for the right job. And so that's kind of what job benchmarking does.
All right. I like it. Sounds good. And of course, we'll keep bringing in the BGU transformational leadership perspectives, as we're looking
Bill.
at organizations. Go ahead. Did somebody have a question?
Yeah, Tim's got his hand
Tim,
up.
go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I do. On number 7, job benchmarking, the one by is it Immordino? Is that the organizational assessment and improvement book, or is that a different one?
Let me pull it off my shelf. Yeah, organizational assessment and improvement. Yeah, that's Immordino's book, and then
Okay.
Price's book is Complete Leader.
Complete Leader. Okay, all right, got it.
And by the way, some books, if you choose not to buy something, are available online in our BGU library. Like I think the Bowman's and Deal Frames, which is a fairly weighty book. I don't expect you to read that book word for word. I want you to just kind of get an idea of what's there, and kind of use it as part of your toolkit. Okay. But I think that one is, like, for example, I think that particular book you can get in the online library, and you can download a PDF file, which is kind of neat, kind of saves you some money. And our librarian, Jennifer Roman, she tries to look at the syllabi each term. And if she's able to get a hold of online type books that we can put in the library, she does it. She's just really great about that. If you've not been in our BGU online library, I really encourage you to take a look at that. When you go into the Populi course, anytime you go into the Populi, the top left-hand screen, there's a little menu bar up there. I think it'll say something like college management and a few other things, but there's a library link up there. You click it, and it'll take you into the online library. Once you're there, you'll have a search box, and you can search for things in our library, based according to books, dissertations. That's the catalog. There's another tab in that online library. I think it's just called links, and it takes you to all kinds of databases. So if you've not become familiar with the BGU online library, you really got to do it, okay?
Bill,
Go ahead.
Bill, maybe Boss has got a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my question is about maybe if I can't access some of the books under the required reading list online on the online library, and I may not have access to those books here in Kigali either. I'm wondering if that happens, if I can, and I don't know which ones they are, but if I can then choose a book from the optional, the recommended list. Is that something that is you're open to?
You can do that. I mean, it becomes a little bit of a struggle because each of these books we're using as a focus in the required reading. We're using each of those books as a focus for that particular week's assignments, discussion, etc. So you know, sometimes if you can't get a hold of a book yourself because of your locality, I would recommend emailing Jennifer Roman. And once you go in the Populi course and you hit the library link there at the top, over on the right-hand page, you'll see an email link for Jennifer Roman, who's the online librarian. Sometimes she can at least get you partial online versions of a book if you just absolutely are unable to, you know, access a book. But you really do need to make every effort to get a hold of the books if you can, because, you know, they're all the textbooks for the course that we really are expecting you to become familiar with. So, but if you have to even get, you know, a partial version of it through Jennifer Roman, I would encourage you to do that.
Good, thanks.
I have a, can I make a comment about that?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I try to get all my books as PDFs. So, you know, if he's having trouble, I can probably get him it as a PDF. I don't know if that's any value to him if he can read it as a PDF, but I'm just letting you know that I may have that as a resource.
All right.
Thanks, Tim. That's great. And I can probably get,
that
especially
is great.
okay. I can get the complete leader probably in a PDF if that would be helpful as well. So.
Okay. So there's another resource. Dr. Graves says he can probably get at least that book.
Yeah, thanks.
So checking in with Dr. Graves and checking in with Jennifer Roman. There's two sources anyway that you can be checking into. All right. Let's see. One thing, you know, what we're supposed to do is kind of tell you, what I try to do is organize your view of this course according to some of the learning objectives that are in the syllabus. You know, one of the learning objective talks about knowing organizational theory. So some of these different books will get you a hold of some of the theory behind an organization. Another part is to review organizational assessment guides. And of course, we've mentioned the Imordino book. And I think the complete leader also will kind of fit into that with the 25 categories. And then finally, a learning objective is coming up with your own assessment process. And that's really what you'll be doing as you kind of look through the books, go through the weeks. You're going to come up with your own assessment plan that works for you, that you can use in your organization and possibly other organizations, okay? I will mention that the final project for this course, you will come up with a plan of assessment. You're not expected to carry out that plan, okay? You won't have time to carry it out. But we're looking for the kind of plan that you would determine to go into an organization. We'll ask you to develop some questions that you might be able to get at the kind of information you want in some of the critical areas of that organization. We'll try to talk about, you know, putting down a profile of that organization, starting that assessment chapter with a profile of the organization. Again, the areas that you want to assess, the kinds of questions that you want to ask of that organization, who are some of the main people that you'll want to meet with, and then the important area, how are you going to distribute the information of your assessment to that organization? How will you begin to communicate to that organization the results, of your assessment? Again, we're just asking for the plan, not the actual carrying out of that process in an organization. All right. Anything else, Jeremy, you want to add?
No, don't. I guess one other thing. So there, you are going to get an opportunity to take a sample assessment. I think it's in week 6. And once you take that assessment, if you want to, I will send you the results of that assessment and set up a time to meet with you one-on-one if it would be helpful. It's just a sample of an assessment that we use when we're working with organizations, and it's got several different sciences that are kind of attached to it. And Ron will be able to explain it even more in depth how we use it. But I talked to the organization, and they're going to give us free assessments. So you all will get an opportunity to take an assessment and then get the results of that. It will give you about an 80-page report that we use when we're working with organizations. So with that being said, when you see that link, which I think is in week 6, if you want to take it, I'll be more than happy to find some time to kind of share with you how we use it. And then Ron will, in our Zoom room, he'll be able to use it as well. So I felt like it would be good to at least let you see a little bit about how we use a assessment that we use with an organization.
Wow, that will be fantastic. Yeah, I really encourage you to take advantage of that link in week 6, because to do that, it would cost you a lot of money if you want to just do that on your own. But to be able to have that kind of resource, I really encourage you to take advantage of that. Okay. Again, Dr. Graves will be kind of the person you're going to be interacting with mainly in this course. I'm kind of handing the baton over to him, so to speak. I wanted to kind of get it started, kind of doing this first Zoom with you. I will be with you around on the Zoom rooms that we'll be doing. We'll talk about that just in a moment, but I do want you to be doing most of your interaction with Dr. Graves. He'll be looking at your discussions each week. He'll be looking at your weekly, any assignments that are assigned, during a week, and then he'll be grading the final paper for this course too. So again, he will be your main contact person, and again, just really appreciate his background and his expertise. Okay. I think I will ask, before we get too far, since you're here too, Jeremy, let's just talk about this.
Okay.
We are required to do 4 Zoom rooms in a BGU course. Okay. I'm thinking we would not do a Zoom room in week 2 or 3. Week 2 is you guys are reading the frames model. You can do that on your own. Work 3 is on the cultural considerations model, and then possibly using a little bit of the Hofstede. Week 4, we have Dr. Brad Smith as a guest speaker with us. He'll be doing Joy at Work. Week 5 is when we'd have, you mentioned Paul Bentley and then yourself.
Yep.
Anyway, we've got some guest speakers. I guess what I'm trying to decide, if you want to meet the next 2 weeks, Dr. Graves, or you want to just let them work on their own?
I am okay letting them work on their own, since we're going to have, some back-to-back weeks of speakers. I think that might be the best, but I also want to be sensitive if any of them feel like they want to connect.
Okay. Yeah, if we leave out weeks 2 and 3, we still end up with 6 Zoom rooms for this course. So I don't want to
overwhelm people.
Overwhelm you with Zoom rooms either. So,
yeah, exactly.
Okay. The other issue, I think we talked about possibility of moving when we do a Zoom room. Say if we follow that schedule, the next Zoom room would be the week of, what would that be the week?
April 23rd.
23rd, yeah.
Yep.
So that would possibly be the next Zoom room week. We talked about moving the Zoom room to possibly toward the end of the week. so that you guys would have a chance to do some reading before you have the guest speaker. You can go either way. You could have a guest speaker on what you're going to be talking about, or you could have the do some reading and then have the guest speaker. I'm going to kind of let you lead that discussion, Jeremy.
Yeah. So one of the things that I brought up to Bill when we were kind of having a conversation was at least for the adaptive leadership and the job benchmarking, if nothing else, those two, it would be good for you to have already been familiar with the book, or at least some of the concepts in the book, before we have those discussions. And so I asked the question, if the assignments are opening up on the Sunday before and then the classes on a Monday, that's a pretty tight turnaround to try to get anything done. So we have kind of two options. One is we can give you a heads up on when those are coming. You know what books are there, so you can be prepared for that, and we can continue on Mondays. Or we can look at another time during the week that might work for you. So I'd like to hear from some of the rest of you. Have you kind of already looked and put Mondays in as a time that works, or do you want to change things up and be a little flexible?
Hubert, I think you've got your hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, I have not slotted Monday in as a time, but given the scenario you're presenting, where we get a heads up on Sunday what is coming, it might be best to have the space to complete the reading. So we have the Zoom room late in the week.
Okay. Okay. Tim, you said you like Mondays?
Yes, it's not that I'm not open to another day, but I did move my schedule to
Okay.
make Mondays work.
Okay.
I mean, I can be flexible, but
Sure.
it's helpful for me to slot something in and know, okay, for the next 8 weeks or 10 weeks, this is kind of what I need to do.
Sure.
So, but either way, I mean, if I knew what they were ahead of time, that'd be just helpful.
Yeah. So my thought is, because Hubert, I agree with your point as well. Is if you're only finding out about it on Sunday night and or Sunday morning, and it's Monday. So what I talked to Judy about was actually putting a preparation for the coming week, so that as you're looking at, say, week 5, at the beginning of week 5, it'll say in preparation for week 6, read, Canoeing the Mountains. Is that something, does that put too much on you to be thinking that way? Or does that work so that we can keep Mondays as a consistent time to gather?
That would work for me.
Can you say that one more time, please?
Sure. So what I talked to Judy about was putting kind of a in the each week that the module opens, to have reading for the next week coming up. So for instance,
Yeah.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah. So
Okay.
we're basically a week and a half ahead of where we need to be.
Yeah, that's kind of
with the knowledge.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking forward to. Personally, for me, Mondays work best because I never have a class on Mondays. But I can't say that the rest of the week. So it doesn't mean I can't move things around and make things happen, but Mondays do work well for me, that I can have it on my schedule and just know. So if it works for everybody and you have enough heads up to know what's coming, so that you know a week and a half ahead that that's the book we're going to be discussing in the next Zoom room, I'd like to go that way if that doesn't cause too many people too many problems.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that works for me.
That would be okay with me, given the heads up.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that works for me too.
Okay,
Okay.
cool.
Perfect.
So what we could do then, yeah, when you go into a Poppy-like course, you've got like the to-do stuff. We could just kind of have what's going on to do for this week. And then on below that, we could kind of have the reading and the discussion topics for the next week. So yeah, you'd end up having, like we said, about a week and a half heads up before the next topics come up. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the way I look at the schedule then, we wouldn't do Zoom rooms on week 2 or week 3. So our next Zoom room would be on April, what is that, Monday of April 22nd, 23rd?
Yep, April
April
23rd.
23. And let's see. Yeah, because we've got Brad Smith. He's put that into his schedule, so we really do need to hold on to that.
Yep.
I'm looking at the time frame. Does this time frame work about right?
We had originally said 10, which was 9
Your time, yeah.
Yeah, so 10 my time, 9 Pacific time, which would be 11 East Coast time, and then once we get outside the U.S., that changes everything. I know for all of you.
Yeah. If we like do, that's not bad. Everybody's 10 a.m. here in my time is 11 your time, Jeremy.
Yep.
7 p.m. in Germany, 1 p.m. in Ohio, 12 noon in Missouri, 7 in Rwanda, and then another 7 in Germany. I'd kind of written down the time schedules where people are at.
Okay.
I think, I'm trying to remember I'll have to ask Brad. I think 1 o'clock works best for you, Tim, if I remember correctly. You said you could do it, but right now you got 1 o'clock your time scheduled out. Let me just see if Brad can move I'd ask him for an hour earlier than that, but I'm gonna see if he could go ahead and do, be 1 o'clock your time, 10 o'clock my time, 11 o'clock Jeremy's. I'll ask Brad about that, if that works. So that'd make our next schedule would be on April 23. And
I was going to,
go ahead.
I was going to ask, 1 p.m. is my 7 p.m., which is a little bit late. Can you move 1 hour earlier? Does that work for us?
That's fine with me. Tim, that puts you at noon. Don't know how that works for you.
I mean, if we change it up, I mean, I moved my schedule to do this time, but I can try to do that again. So as long as I know ahead of time, then I'll try to make changes to whatever I need.
So Bill, if we moved back an hour, so we started at 9, 10, 11, 12. That's what I've told all of the folks that I've got scheduled, that we were doing it at 10 o'clock my time, which is 9 o'clock yours, and we have Brad scheduled at 11 o'clock his time, which is 10 o'clock here, I believe. So if we moved that and we just stayed consistent there, I think everybody is pretty much good to go, if it works for Tim to move his schedule back.
Yeah, I can do it. I can do it. Sure.
Okay.
If that's when it works, then I'll make it work.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just kind of summarize then that. That means for you, Jeremy, that's going to be 10 o'clock your time.
Yep.
9 o'clock my time. Hubert,
That
you
should
would
be
be at
12 o'clock
6
my time.
p.m. 6 p.m. Hubert, right?
No, 6 p.m. No, for me, this is 1 o'clock here right now. Well, just after 1 here. So that should correspond to about the same time.
If we So it's 1 o'clock there now, Hubert, right now?
Yeah, 1:46 to be exact.
Okay.
Huh.
1:46.
Okay, have some time.
So if we started at noon your time, or 12 your time, does that work?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
Noon is okay.
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 Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. So again, it's 10 o'clock your time, Jeremy, right?
Yes.
9
Yes.
o'clock my time, and then Tim, yours is 12, and Hubert, yours is 1.
No,
Okay. Does that work for
mine
everybody
is
else
12.
then?
Mine would be 12 too.
No,
If you're
Hubert's is
moving it-
12 as well. Yes.
Where are you located, Hubert?
I'm in Guyana.
Oh, I got you
Guyana
over.
in South America. So
Yeah,
I'm
South
with
America.
Atlantic time.
Oh,
So it's
that's
about-
right. Okay. Yeah. I was looking at the wrong time frame here. Yeah, you're 1 o'clock. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So 9 our time is going to be noon your time. All right.
Jeremy, does that work for you?
Yeah, this works great.
Okay.
All right. So April 23, we'll just put in Eastern time, which is 12 noon Eastern Daylight Time. Okay, I've got that down. Anything else on a housekeeping effort here? All right.
Yeah, real quick, how much time should we allocate for each meeting?
You know, about an hour and 15 minutes is what I usually kind of think of for a time period,
Okay,
if at all
thank you.
possible. Today, we've been doing a lot of housekeeping, so we'll just kind of abbreviate some of our other stuff.
Sure.
What I think we'll do, let's see, let's just do a little bit of discussion here. You know, I gave you some stuff on Drucker's book, but I think I'm gonna take you over to the Walmart article since we had you read that. We talked about, you know, Walmart in China. And why that's there is just kind of seeing how, you know, one group, one organization, one company, as they went into another culture, you know, the kind of things they had to be aware of, okay? And, you know, they had to make some changes in the way they marketed their goods, so to speak. And I think that would probably be somewhat similar to a lot of organizations. You know, one of Drucker's ideas is the idea that, let me get back down to there. One of Drucker's ideas is, you know, relating the organization to the environment, always asking, okay, am I staying relevant to what's going on in my particular context? And an organization has to always be asking that question. Are my programs, the way I'm approaching it, am I still relevant? Am I still relating to my target audience in an effective manner? Okay. So the Walmart article kind of helps us think about that a little bit. So let's just look at a question here. Number 2, how did Walmart utilize the awareness of their customers and their stakeholders' values? Can you think of some thoughts that came from that article that showed how Walmart tried to adapt their marketing, their approach to a Chinese culture? What do you think? Go ahead, Hubert.
I saw the Chinese government had this goal of wanting to expand their sustainability, and Walmart decided to make the effort to make the company a more sustainable company in their China operations. And I think from that standpoint, they started to push the issues of them going green in China.
Okay. By going green, what was Walmart being sensitive to there? Because they were working with the public,
Yeah,
but they were also working with the government.
The environmental concerns that the public was having,
Right.
in terms of them being responsible stewards of the environment.
Okay. Those are also some governmental concerns.
Yeah,
Okay?
those were also some governmental concerns.
Right. So I mean, Walmart was trying to walk this line where they were actually trying to
satisfy the government and the customer.
satisfy the government. Right. They were trying to say, okay, how can we get the government on our side? So that if we're meeting some of those government's goals, that government's going to be more supportive of us as a company coming into their nation, right? So yeah, that seemed to be one of the reasons they really even brought in some of the regulations, at least from my perspective, that that was meeting some of the goals of the government at that point in time. Okay. What else were they doing to being aware of their customers? It's kind of thinking about how did they actually approach the idea of putting forth their goods, displaying their goods? Which would be very different than what we do here, say, in the United States. Hubert, did you have another comment on that, or you just haven't moved your hand yet?
Sorry, haven't removed my hand.
Okay, I'll lower that. By the way, Jeremy, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to see that screen.
Yeah, I can.
If somebody's hand is up, you can lower it, etc.
Yep.
My apologies, guys. I'm learning to.
Oh, me too. Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, we're all kind of learning this technology.
Hey, can you say the question again?
It's actually on the screen, number 2 there. How did they utilize awareness of their customers, stakeholders, values, etc.?
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks.
I guess something that struck me, at least as I read that article, Walmart had some displays set up almost like an open air market as you'd come into that Walmart store, which was in some segments of that culture was a marketing, a way that goods were often marketed. So they had kiosks set up in various places. That would not be a typical marketing approach in, say, the United States.
Right.
Okay. We're more accustomed to walking down aisles with, you know, goods in order. So that was one issue that struck me, at least from what I saw there. The food regulations, the environmental concerns, that was another one.
Well, I think
Incorporate a life cycle approach to.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I think even an awareness of their potential customers and their anxieties about local markets versus multinational corporations and who can provide better quality control. So even the writer, the author, made a comment that in the US, anyway, we're skeptical of very large chains, and we think they'll sell us a bad product to make a buck. So we'll go to small local places to try and get a better quality product, whereas a lot of the anxieties around public health and the quality of products were the opposite in China. And so Walmart, in a sense, being aware of that, is able to capitalize on it, given its structure. So that's even kind of a national awareness about how customers view retail access points and what the quality of the product might be.
Yeah, that's good. Anything else that stood out to you in terms of awareness of the customers and the stakeholders and the values?
Well, one thing that stood out for me is the high level of interaction between Walmart and their customers, their stakeholders. The way the provided, like you mentioned, outdoor displays, but also like intentional interaction. One other thing that I found interesting was that they're engaging in an experiment of a consumer behavior modification.
That's right.
That was something with individuals, with communities, that was really positioning them for further growth.
Okay, that's good. Number 4, kind of think about this, because at BGU, we emphasize the idea of collaboration, partnerships, trying to get the job done in a community, for example, by learning how we can collaborate with other groups, with other organizations. In Walmart, it seems to me they were looking for some ways to collaborate with the government, right, in order to meet some of the governmental goals, environmental issues, etc. By doing that, they were meeting some of the goals of the government, but then Walmart, of course, was meeting some of their own, company goals of establishing a successful startup company in China. As you think about your own situation right now, organizations, I'm not sure, what you're involved in right now. Do you see the issue of collaboration? Does that happen within your particular setting with other groups, with other organizations? Or do you see your organization pretty much just kind of working on their own?
Yeah, this is Tim. And I guess my response to that question, it is very interesting how Walmart adapted to meet a completely different culture or cultural norms like in China. And I have my own kind of small startup business. I do some organizational consulting facilitation, and I can see the value of collaboration and adapting to meet partners' needs in order to advance our cause and theirs to create success. So it almost is a big example. In other words, Walmart is almost like, to me, that's an example that is at an international level of something that most, I think, organizations need to do at whatever level they're at.
Okay.
Good.
One of Drucker's big values is becoming aware of customer values, stakeholder values, constituent values. Okay. That was the main issue that I'd thought about this Walmart article. It was Walmart was trying to become aware of those stakeholder values if they're going to do business and function in that environment. And I imagine the same thing, even in your work, Dr. Graves, with organizations. Is that an issue that you would be dealing with on how that organization is interacting with their particular environmental context?
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of one. I've been working for the last 3 years with one of the largest yogurt manufacturers in the United States, and actually, they've kind of decided to go. They're really moving towards going global. And one of the things that they've been really trying to figure out is how do we collaborate, not just in our own community, because they've got a East Coast and a West Coast presence and an international presence, but how do we actually collaborate with organizations that, say, for instance, we are suppliers. They supply us with milk, or they supply us with whatever they might need. And how do we collaborate better so that they're successful and we're successful in that process? And so I see collaboration as a major, and sometimes it's a major sticking point for organizations, because at the end of the day, when you're talking about organizations that have to make money, sometimes the bottom line is we can collaborate, but we can only collaborate to a point because of the financial repercussions of too much collaboration. And so walking that balance and finding that line, I think, was something that I actually took from the Walmart article as well. Was how do you find that line, and how do you also then, to keep it in the BGU context, collaborate you know, with people within your organization or your communities who are going to be able to help you in that process.
Okay.
So a question I have, this is Tim. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, do it.
You know, you were talking about that, and I think you even might have used, you know, as you were explaining collaboration there,
Uh-huh.
It made me think of, and I haven't read the book, but let's see, what did he say earlier? Week 6, adaptive leadership. I can understand adaptive leadership within the organization, but I think that may even be a situation where they had to adapt as an organization. They had to lead globally. They had to lead in the nation they were going into and adapt to make that fit. So it took maybe adaptive leadership to a more of a marketplace level or more of a societal level, in how much they had to adapt to actually collaborate.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Hubert, did you still have your hand up?
I just put it up. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Actually, in my own setting, I work in the area of one of the areas I work in, sorry, is in waste management. And as the issues, environmental issues related to the proper management of waste, as people become more aware of them, you find that the government is wanting to, well, have, for example, the specific focus area I have right now is on the disposal side of the waste management process. So I'm actually based at a landfill and we're dealing with managing that site. But the company I'm a part of is also involved in the collection process. And they have decided over the past few years to move into also the management of the disposal facilities. And most recently, as they seek how they can grow, not just grow their business, but work to better supply service, they have entered into, well, what might be joint venture with who was a company that was previously competing with them for service. And they are also looking at how they collaborate with government in terms of what the government's needs are, how they see them, how the government sees the steps that they would make to improve the waste management system, how, you know, what strategy, what sort of approach they're taking. And having a sense of that, work with the government to see how they as a private sector organization might be able to supply some of the things the government needs. So sort of make investments in areas that the government of themselves might not make the investment, but the private sector here stepping in to make the investment so that the government in turn could meet their targets in terms of where they want to drive the process. So for example, let me see if I could give a practical example here. In our society, we have a lot of what we do, we basically just dispose of the waste and it goes straight towards landfilling, right? Or in few cases you have, well, not few cases, quite a few cases you have open dumps. But in the main, it goes towards some disposal facility to just be buried. And there is the private sector seeking to step in to collaborate with government as to how we might be able to move towards, let's say, introducing composting. So you have, and then also other issues of maybe waste to energy and that kind of thing. But it would then call for a collaboration between the private sector and government to make those things happen.
Okay, yeah, no, that's good. One of the issues I guess I was kind of thinking about is that from a BGU point of view, we think of, say, a concept of theology of work. We think about, say, organizations having some kind of a social consciousness of what, what they're doing, how they're actually bringing some betterment to society. Okay, there's the bottom financial line, but then there's the whole issue of what is it we are doing as an organization to bring betterment to our community. I was looking at this quote from Drucker I put on the slide. You know, Drucker, he defines one of the parts of a purpose of a business should be creating tomorrow's society of citizens through the social sector. And so, you know, trying to relate the purposes of business, and I said to our theology of work. You know, in a theology of work, we talk about the fact that organizations need to be looking at their bottom line, but they also need to be looking at, okay, if I have a social conscience, we as Christians would say, if I have a God consciousness of what God is actually wanting to use this particular organization for in the grand scheme of his purposes, how is that organization contributing to the betterment of a society? And is the organization even thinking in those kinds of categories? I think even as you're talking about waste management, you may be thinking about some of those. Okay, what are some of the processes, the approaches to use for waste management that are going to actually better the community, as opposed to just getting rid of the waste in the most economical way feasible?
So those would include things like helping to promote reuse and recycling. And so the organization looking at that have begun to invest in equipment that will help to facilitate that. And one of the areas, for example, most recently, that they would have done is invest in something like a tire shredder to help to start the process of being able to shred the tires so they can be reused or recycled. There are a few others, not my organization per se, but there are a few others who have begun to look at the issue of utilization of plastics for recycling, right? And you do have quite a few organizations who have begun to look at the reuse of materials. So they become middlemen, and they've been purchasing reusable materials out of the system, and then deal with the whole sanitizing of the materials for reuse. So from my organization standpoint, I do think I'm not too certain they would be okay with the theology of work, but as they look how their whole social responsibility and they see the opportunities existing for them to improve their bottom line, they have been making the investments.
Okay, no, that's good. Yeah, I mean, we as Christians aren't going to expect, people who are non-Christians to be using our language. Okay, right?
Yes.
When we talk about theology of work, okay? But we are trying to determine, try to take some of the concepts of there and try to apply them, wherever the Lord has planted each one of us into our particular areas of the world, and in our particular areas of whether it's business or nonprofit organizations, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, we've got about 5 minutes, and then we'll probably shut this session down. Anything else you want to bring up, talk about? Let's just open the floor. I could just mention, I guess, then I will just mention some of the stuff you'll be doing this next week. We were just talking about, an organization becoming, sensitive to the customer base, the needs around them, et cetera, the environment, whatever it happens to be. The book you're going to kind of look at next week, and I say you don't have to read it in detail, just kind of become aware of what's in there and any things there that would be helpful to you in terms of analyzing a particular organizational framework, infrastructure. You know, this frames model, framing organizations is the name of the book. And again, what that book is going to be doing is just giving you one way to look at an organization. You know, the structural leadership infrastructure, the human resource structures. We talked about the political issues, the power points, the power focuses in that particular organization. You know, in an organization, you can sometimes you'll have the designated leaders, you'll have the informal leaders, and so all those people are working at various levels. And then we talk about the symbolic, cultural, ritual area. Kind of go through and kind of get a hold of those 4 areas as you're looking at the book. And then the discussion, at least what I've got for that week, would be to try to apply. I have to go back and see. There's 2. There was an assignment for the week, and I think it was just trying to apply some of those 4 categories to an organization that you have some relationship with. I think in the discussion you may be trying to determine what are some of the symbolic cultural issues that are possibly involved in your particular organization. Anyway, that's kind of what you're doing with that book.
Hey, Bill, can
Go
I
ahead.
share something?
Yeah.
So one of the ways that I would suggest maybe you guys could use part of that book is to literally take a piece of 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and make those 4 quadrants: the structures, the HR, the political, the symbols. And as you're going through kind of trying to get a grasp and understanding that, think about your organizations and start writing even just bullet points of where do you see the structures within your organization? Where do you see the people within your organizations? What about the leaders within your organizations? Just as a way to kind of get your mind around it. Because then when you're getting ready to do the discussion, it could be helpful for you to be able just to look back at that quadrant. I sometimes take that, not that exact approach, that frames approach, but it was based out of some of that frames approach. When I'm sitting with an organization, I will draw a quadrant on my paper and be listening to the different ways that they're describing the pain points and see what box it will go in. Is it a people problem? Is it a structural problem? Is it something to do with the symbols that's causing confusion? Is it a political? So anyway, just as maybe a different way to think about that as you're going about it next week.
Yeah, it's a great idea. You might want to even maybe incorporate that into the written assignment or the discussion. Yeah, I'm going to kind of let you guys, kind of work with us each week. Hey, what's the best way to get at that information and the best way to apply it? I've got a structure there in the course that, I inherited part of it, but you, Jeremy, or like I've already said, you're perfectly free to change any of that so that it, really, just like you just said, that's a fantastic, way to go about getting that information applied to an organization. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Not on my end.
Okay. I think just to be true to our time frame, I got an hour and 15 minutes. I think we'll hold it to that. So again, this week, I think you're just working in the getting to know you discussion area. Just ask you to work with each other on that, do some discussing, thinking through. Get familiar with the course site, especially that page called the info page. There's some resources there that you should be looking at. There's the criteria there for discussions and papers and all that kind of course content that you'll need to be aware of as you're going through this course. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and close down the session. Thanks for joining me and Dr. Graves, and just be looking forward to seeing the kind of comments and issues that you'll be working with online over the next few weeks. Again, our next Zoom room will be April 23. And we put the time, and we'll put that in. We'll put that announcement out to you as we get closer to that time frame. Okay, with that, anything else?
All right.
Not on my end. Feel free to reach out to me if you need anything. My email's on there, so just reach out and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Sounds good. Okay, with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the session. And
Thank
this
you.
session was recorded. If you want it, it usually takes a few hours to get a session. I have to load it onto YouTube, and then I'll put the link in the room on the course on that week, and you can always get at these sessions, a little more if you want to go back and look at something. All right. With that, let me just look at the chat room. Anything else that we need to be aware of? Okay, nothing there. Great. Have a great day, great night, whatever it happens to be in your particular part of the world.
You
Goodbye
too.
now.
All right.
Thank you.
Goodbye, friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.